Throughout history, few institutions have wielded as much power as the Church. It shaped laws, controlled kings, and influenced every aspect of daily life in Europe. But when you peel back the layers of holy words and sacred rituals, what often emerges is not a beacon of morality but a dark legacy of violence, greed, and control. The Crusades are often taught as heroic quests to reclaim holy lands. But when the details are examined, they reveal something far more disturbing. In 1095, Pope Urban II called on Christians to march to Jerusalem, claiming it was God's will. But what followed wasn't divine. It was a brutal, bloody campaign of conquest that lasted nearly 2 centuries. Entire cities were wiped off the map. Men, women, and children were slaughtered without mercy. The First Crusade ended with the massacre of tens of thousands of Muslims and Jews in Jerusalem. Chroniclers of the time describe the streets running ankle-deep in blood. The Church promised salvation in exchange for violence. Knights were told that killing non-Christians wasn't just acceptable. It was a guaranteed ticket to heaven. This wasn't a war for defense. It was a war of aggression, fueled by promises of land, wealth, and eternal reward. The Fourth Crusade didn't even bother reaching the Holy Land. Instead, Christian crusaders sacked Constantinople, a Christian city, looting churches, stealing relics, and installing their own puppet rulers. It wasn't about faith, it was about power, greed, and control. While the Crusades raged abroad, the Church's grip tightened at home. The Inquisitions became one of its most terrifying tools. The goal was simple: root out heresy. But what counted as heresy was vague, shifting, and always at the discretion of church officials. Whisper a doubt, question a priest, refuse to pay tithes, and you risked being branded a heretic. The Spanish Inquisition, perhaps the most infamous, started in 1478. It targeted Jews, Muslims, and anyone suspected of holding beliefs outside of church doctrine. Thousands were tortured, forced to confess crimes they didn't commit. Confessions were extracted with methods so brutal they're still shocking today. Strappado, the rack, water torture. Victims were burned alive, their ashes scattered so no grave could serve as a memorial. Even being dead wasn't protection. The Inquisition famously exhumed corpses, put them on trial, and then desecrated their remains. These weren't isolated incidents, they were systematic. The Church created a bureaucracy around torture and execution. Trials were secret, evidence wasn't needed, and once accused, escape was nearly impossible. Families of the condemned had their property seized, filling the Church's coffers. It became a well-oiled machine of profit and persecution. And it didn't stop there. The Church's scandals stretch far beyond the medieval era. For centuries, it maintained power by controlling knowledge. Books were burned. Scientists were silenced. When Galileo argued that the Earth revolved around the sun, the Church put him on trial for heresy. He was forced to recant his discoveries under threat of torture. The Church clung to a flat, geocentric world, not because of evidence, but because it served their narrative of divine creation. For ordinary people, the Church wasn't just a spiritual guide. It was the law, the judge, the executioner. People were taught that every action, every thought was watched by God and judged by priests. Guilt wasn't an emotion. It was a currency the Church controlled. Selling indulgences became one of their most corrupt practices. Priests told people they could buy forgiveness. The rich could pay to erase sins, while the poor were left praying for mercy. In some cases, indulgences were sold in advance. Sins that hadn't even been committed yet were prepaid. Murder, theft, adultery, there was a price for everything. The scale of wealth accumulated through these means was staggering. By the 16th century, the Church owned roughly 1/3 of all land in Europe. Vast cathedrals were built, towering symbols of power and privilege funded by the labor and poverty of common people. While peasants starved, bishops dined like kings. The Church was the largest landowner, the biggest financial institution, and the ultimate authority. Yet it preached humility. The corruption ran deep. The Borgia family, who produced 2 popes, turned the Vatican into a crime syndicate. Pope Alexander VI used his position to amass wealth, arrange marriages, and eliminate rivals. He fathered multiple children while promoting celibacy as holy virtue. Nepotism was rampant. Positions of power were sold to the highest bidder, regardless of morality or competence. And then came the child abuse scandals, centuries later, but born from the same system of unchecked power. Reports of priests abusing children surfaced long before the modern era, but it was the 20th and 21st centuries that finally exposed the scale. In country after country, victims came forward, telling the same stories: molestation, rape, and a system that protected the predators, not the children. The church moved abusive priests from parish to parish, covering up crimes, silencing victims, and shielding itself from accountability. In the United States alone, it's estimated that over 4,000 priests have been accused of sexual abuse. In Ireland, government inquiries revealed mass graves at church-run orphanages, where hundreds of children died from neglect, abuse, or were simply buried without records. The financial cost of these scandals runs into billions. The human cost is incalculable. Lives destroyed, generations traumatized, and still the institution survives. Often unapologetic, sometimes shifting blame onto society itself. The church's involvement in politics has been just as troubling. It aligned itself with fascist regimes, blessing dictators who pledged loyalty. Franco in Spain, Mussolini in Italy, even Hitler's rise in Germany saw quiet complicity from church leaders. The Vatican signed a concordat with Nazi Germany in 1933, giving legitimacy to a regime that would go on to murder millions. Rarely did the church speak out against these atrocities. More often, it turned a blind eye, concerned with preserving its own influence. The pattern is clear. Whenever power was within reach, the church took it. Whenever money was to be made, it found a way. Whenever morality stood in the way, it was rewritten. Even today, the church's wealth is staggering. The Vatican sits on untold riches, gold, art, property, and investments scattered around the world. Yet it claims to speak for the poor. In some parts of Africa and South America, where poverty is rampant, the church still preaches against contraception, worsening overpopulation and suffering. The irony is hard to miss. An institution built on centuries of violence and greed, now telling the world it holds the moral high ground. The dark history of the church is not just a relic of the past. It's a legacy that continues to shape societies, influence politics, and impact millions of lives. For an institution that claims to be divinely guided, its history looks very human, driven by the same desires for power, wealth, and control that fuel every empire. And that raises a simple but uncomfortable question. If an institution claiming divine authority can act with such cruelty, corruption, and indifference for so long, what does that say about the nature of belief itself? About the dangers of trusting any group that claims to have all the answers? Church taught people to fear hell. But when you look at history, it becomes clear that hell was never some distant afterlife. For many, it was right here on earth, built brick by those who claimed to serve God. If you found this video thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Your support helps me keep this channel going. If you'd like to support my work, you can join me on Patreon. The link is in the bio. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.